She was England's most formidable ruler, commanding kingdoms, navigating treacherous politics, and shaping history itself. But behind the gilded halls, jeweled gowns, and portraits of eternal youth, Elizabeth I was slowly dying. Her body betrayed her in secret. Chronic pain, fatigue, dental decay, and the invisible weight of untreated illness haunted every day of her reign. She endured silently, hiding suffering beneath lead-white makeup, wigs, and ritual, refusing to let weakness tarnish the image of the Virgin Queen. The terrifying truth is not just that she was ill, it is that she ruled a nation while slowly being destroyed from within. She is the most powerful woman in the world, and she is dying slowly, quietly, and in full view of everyone who refuses to notice. Courtiers see her painted face, her jeweled gowns, her rigid posture on the throne, and they call her ageless. They whisper that she is untouched by time. But beneath the white makeup, beneath the stiff ruffs and heavy perfumes, Queen Elizabeth I's body is failing her. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but in a way far more terrifying, piece by piece, year by year. While she pretends nothing is wrong, Elizabeth Tudor is not supposed to be weak. From the moment she takes the throne in 1558, she understands that survival depends on image. England is unstable. Enemies surround her. Catholics plot. Foreign powers watch for signs of failure. A sick queen is a vulnerable queen. So Elizabeth learns early that illness must be hidden, denied, reshaped into myth. And yet, illness follows her anyway. Even as a young woman, Elizabeth's health is fragile. She survives smallpox in 1562, a disease that kills thousands and leaves survivors scarred, blind, or broken. Elizabeth lives, but she is changed. The sickness nearly kills her. For days, the court prepares for her death. When she recovers, she never fully forgives her body for betraying her. The scars are hidden beneath thick white makeup made from lead. The substance smooths her skin, masks imperfections, and slowly poisons her. Over time, it damages her hair, her teeth, her nerves. But Elizabeth wears it anyway. Her appearance is armor. Pain is secondary. As the years pass, something else becomes clear to those closest to her. The Queen is almost always unwell. She complains of headaches that last for days, of stomach pain that leaves her unable to eat, of sudden weakness, trembling, and fatigue. Her sleep is poor. Her moods swing sharply from sharp wit and brilliance to rage, melancholy, and withdrawal. Doctors offer explanations that sound confident but explain nothing. Humors are blamed. Diets are adjusted. Blood is let. Elizabeth endures it all because she cannot afford to appear human. Behind closed doors, the symptoms accumulate. Her hair thins dramatically. By her 40s, she wears wigs bright red to mimic the hair of her youth. Her teeth rot and fall out, blackened by sugar and mercury treatments. She avoids smiling. She avoids speaking loudly. Her jaw stiffens. Eating becomes painful. Courtiers begin to notice the smell. Elizabeth uses heavy perfumes to mask it, but the truth cannot be fully hidden. Infection, decay, untreated illness, something inside her is wrong. Something chronic, something progressive. And still, she rules. Elizabeth's reign is long, by the standards of her time. But longevity does not mean health. It means endurance. Every year she grows more rigid, more ceremonial, more trapped inside ritual and symbolism. Movement becomes difficult. Long rides exhaust her. She increasingly relies on chairs, cushions, and supports hidden beneath layers of fabric. The image of the Virgin Queen eternal, untouched, Devon grows stronger precisely because the woman beneath it is fading. Some modern historians suspect severe dental infections spreading through her body. Others point to lead poisoning from cosmetics and medicines. Some argue she suffered from depression so deep it manifested physically. Others suggest autoimmune illness or complications from untreated infections that medicine of the time could not diagnose. What is certain is this: Elizabeth is never well. She simply refuses to stop. As she ages, the court becomes a theater designed to protect her illusion. Appearances are brief, lighting is controlled, distance is maintained. No one sees the Queen closely unless invited, and fewer invitations come. Elizabeth's fear is not death, it is weakness. She has seen what happens to weak monarchs. She watched her mother Anne Boleyn fall. She saw siblings die. She knows that the moment England believes she is dying, the future becomes dangerous. Succession plots will erupt. Loyalty will evaporate. So she hides. Her illness becomes part of her rule, managed, controlled, denied. But the body does not negotiate forever. By her later years, Elizabeth walks with difficulty. Her hands shake, her memory falters, her temper sharpens, the headaches worsen. She spends long periods lying down, curtains drawn, refusing food. Still, she will not name an heir. To acknowledge death is to invite it. And so England is ruled by a queen whose body is failing in slow motion, while the nation pretends not to see it. This is not the story of how Elizabeth I died. It is the story of how she lived while dying and how power, secrecy, and denial allowed illness to shape history from behind a painted face. As the years pass, Elizabeth's illness stops being something that comes and goes. It becomes a constant presence, managed, disguised, worked around. The court learns to read the signs. When the queen grows quiet, when audiences are shortened, when meals are postponed, when tempers flare without warning, they know her body is struggling again, but no one says it out loud. Elizabeth has trained her court well. Weakness is not discussed. Pain is endured privately. The queen's body is a political object, not a human one. To acknowledge its failure would invite chaos. Her physicians are trapped in the same silence. Tudor medicine has limits, no germ theory, no real understanding of chronic disease. Treatments are harsh, purges, bloodletting, mercury-based remedies. Each attempt to help likely worsens her condition. Yet the doctors continue, because doing nothing would be interpreted as negligence. Elizabeth endures these treatments with a grim determination. She does not trust them, but she does not dismiss them either. Control matters more than comfort. Over time, her illness begins to shape her behavior. She becomes increasingly suspicious. Not without reason, plots surround her reign, but illness sharpens the edge. Fatigue erodes patience. Pain narrows tolerance. Elizabeth's legendary temper grows more unpredictable. She lashes out, then withdraws. She alternates between charm and cruelty in the same audience. Those closest to her notice the change first. William Cecil, her most trusted advisor, sees how often decisions are delayed because the queen is unwell. Meetings are rescheduled. Documents pile up. When Elizabeth does appear, she is sometimes brilliant, sometimes unfocused, sometimes frighteningly withdrawn. The queen herself seems aware of the decline. She compensates by clinging harder to ceremony. Ritual becomes armor. The familiar patterns of court life, processions, costumes, rehearsed language, allow her to function even when her body resists her. When everything else feels unstable, ritual does not. Her appearance becomes more artificial with age. The white lead makeup thickens. Wigs become heavier. Gowns grow more elaborate, less practical. The woman beneath disappears further behind the image. This is not vanity alone. It is strategy. Elizabeth understands that perception governs power. If she looks eternal, England believes she is eternal. If she appears strong, her enemies hesitate. So she sacrifices herself to the illusion. The cost is severe. Lead poisoning, if present, would explain many of her symptoms: headaches, memory loss, mood swings, digestive pain, muscle weakness. Dental infections could explain the foul odors noted by foreign ambassadors, the difficulty eating, the facial pain. Chronic untreated illness would explain the fatigue and depression that deepen with age. Elizabeth's doctors cannot diagnose any of this. They treat symptoms blindly. Each treatment weakens her further, and yet she refuses rest. She rides when exhausted. She appears in public when in pain. She listens to petitions long after concentration fades. Her body becomes an instrument she forces to perform. This refusal to acknowledge decline has consequences beyond her health. Elizabeth's unwillingness to confront mortality feeds directly into the succession crisis. She will not name an heir. To do so would be to admit that her reign has an ending. Courtiers whisper. Foreign powers speculate. The future of England hangs in uncertainty, prolonged by the Queen's denial. Her illness, therefore, is not just personal, it is political. The longer she hides it, the more dangerous the silence becomes. By her 50s, Elizabeth's isolation deepens. She trusts fewer people. She avoids intimacy. Even old favorites are kept at a distance. Pain makes closeness risky. Vulnerability feels lethal. The Virgin Queen image hardens not as a romantic symbol, but as a barrier. Elizabeth belongs to no one, needs no one, suffers alone. Those who observe her closely sense the tragedy beneath the power. Foreign ambassadors describe her as frail one day, formidable the next. Rumors circulate, but never fully solidify. England exists in a strange limbo ruled by a woman who is clearly declining, yet officially ageless. This contradiction strains the court. Decisions take longer, crises feel heavier. The Queen's presence, once energizing, becomes unpredictable. Ministers learn to wait for good days. Elizabeth herself seems increasingly aware that time is closing in. Her speeches grow more reflective. Her tone darkens. The bravado softens into something closer to defiance against the inevitable. She speaks of duty more than ambition, of legacy more than victory. Her illness is winning, but she refuses to surrender the narrative. To admit she is dying would mean surrendering control over England's future. And control, to Elizabeth, is survival. So she continues, painted, perfumed, propped upright by ritual and will. A queen ruling a nation while quietly losing a war against her own body. As Elizabeth's body weakens, something else begins to fracture more quietly her inner world. Power protects her from many things, but it cannot protect her from isolation. Illness narrows life, and for a queen, it narrows it in absolute silence. Elizabeth has always been alone, but now loneliness becomes physical. Pain makes conversation exhausting. Fatigue drains curiosity. Trust becomes harder when the body feels unreliable. She withdraws not because she wants to, but because every interaction costs something she no longer has. The court interprets this withdrawal as coldness. In truth, it is endurance. Elizabeth's emotional life grows increasingly guarded. The flirtatious wit of her youth fades. Humor remains, but it sharpens into defense. She mocks before she is questioned. She dazzles before she is examined. This has always been her armor, but illness makes it heavier. The Queen's relationships suffer. Robert Dudley, once her closest companion, fades from her life, not only because of politics, but because closeness requires energy. Intimacy invites observation. Observation risks exposure. Elizabeth cannot afford that. Every friendship becomes a calculation. Her illness also deepens her fear of dependence. She has watched people use weakness as leverage. She has seen how illness invites manipulation. So she refuses help, even when she needs it. This stubbornness costs her dearly. She pushes her body past limits. She refuses rest. She treats pain as an enemy to be conquered rather than a warning to be heeded. In doing so, she accelerates her own decline. Elizabeth's nights are particularly difficult. Insomnia plagues her. Pain flares when the distractions of court fade. Thoughts spiral. She replays betrayals, failures, missed chances. Illness strips away distraction and leaves memory exposed. Depression settles in quietly. Not the dramatic kind, but the slow heaviness of exhaustion. Food loses appeal. Joy feels distant. Even victory feels hollow. Elizabeth still functions, but functioning is not living. And yet, she never allows herself to collapse publicly. When she appears before her people, she becomes something else entirely. Her speeches are deliberate, her posture controlled, her presence commanding. The transformation is so complete that many believe it is real, but it is performance, and performance requires energy she barely has. The effort leaves her drained for days afterward. As Elizabeth ages, grief compounds her illness. Friends die. Advisors retire or pass away. Familiar faces disappear, replaced by younger courtiers who do not remember her strength firsthand. Their loyalty feels conditional. She senses time turning against her. This awareness sharpens her moods. She becomes more volatile, not because she enjoys cruelty. Those around her walk carefully. Her illness also alters how she views love. Elizabeth's refusal to marry has always been political, but as her health declines, it becomes existential. Marriage would mean surrendering control at the moment she feels most fragile. It would mean allowing someone to witness her weakness. She cannot do that. Better to be alone than exposed. The Virgin Queen myth, once a diplomatic strategy, becomes emotional refuge. If she belongs to no one, then no one can claim her decline as leverage. If she is symbol rather than woman, pain becomes irrelevant. But symbols do not age gracefully. Behind closed doors, Elizabeth's body continues to betray her. Walking grows painful. Her hands tremble more noticeably. Headaches intensify. Concentration falters. She grows frustrated with herself, a queen whose mind remains sharp, trapped inside a failing body. This frustration turns inward. She grows harsh in private, critical, restless. She senses that her illness is stealing time she cannot reclaim. And yet, she still refuses to name an heir. To do so would be to admit that her body, not her will decide England's future. That thought is unbearable. Elizabeth clings to authority with increasing desperation. She attends meetings she should cancel. She travels when she should rest. She resists advisors who suggest delegation. Her illness has become part of her identity. To surrender would mean accepting that she is mortal. Elizabeth Tudor has never been allowed that luxury. By now, those closest to her understand the truth, even if they never speak it. The Queen is declining, slowly, unevenly, irreversibly, but the illusion must be maintained. The nation still needs her image more than it needs honesty. Elizabeth knows this, and so she continues to rule not just England but her own suffering. By the time Elizabeth enters the final phase of her reign, her illness is no longer something that merely shadows her life. It dictates it. Every decision, every appearance, every movement is filtered through pain and exhaustion. The difference is that now, even the illusion of control begins to crack. The court senses it before it admits it. Audiences grow shorter. The Queen sits more often. Her silences stretch longer than her words. Where once she would pace, gesture, command the room with physical presence, she now rules from stillness. Stillness, for Elizabeth, is dangerous. It invites observation. She compensates by tightening protocol. Access becomes restricted. Petitions are screened more aggressively. Fewer people are allowed close enough to notice the tremor in her hands, the stiffness in her walk, the strain behind her eyes. Her appearance grows even more elaborate. The makeup heavier, the wigs higher, the gowns more rigid. These are not indulgences, they are scaffolding. Without them, her body would betray her. Foreign ambassadors begin to write darker reports. They describe a queen who appears aged beyond her years, a ruler who seems weary, irritable, and increasingly withdrawn. Rumors spread through Europe, though none can be confirmed. England's enemies wait, hoping for collapse. Elizabeth knows this. Fear sharpens her resolve. She refuses to slow down. Even as her health deteriorates, she clings to power with an intensity that borders on defiance. She attends councils despite pain. She listens to arguments long after her strength fades. She delays decisions not from indecision, but because clarity requires energy she no longer has. This creates tension within her government. Ministers grow frustrated. Crises demand swift action. The Queen's unpredictability makes planning impossible. But no one dares confront her directly. To question Elizabeth's capacity would be treason. And so the silence deepens. Her illness isolates her further. Those who might help are kept at a distance. Those who remain close tread carefully, unsure which version of the Queen they will encounter. Elizabeth senses their caution. It wounds her. She interprets hesitation as doubt, doubt as betrayal. Her paranoia, once a political tool, becomes emotional reflex. She interrogates motives. She reopens old grievances. She remembers slights long forgiven. Pain magnifies memory. As death becomes an unspoken presence, Elizabeth's relationship with time changes. She grows, reflective in moments of quiet, then fiercely present in public. She resists anything that suggests transition. The idea of an heir becomes unbearable. Naming a successor would mean admitting that England is preparing for life without her, that the world is already moving on. She cannot allow that, so she delays, deflects, evades. Her illness thus prolongs instability. England exists in a state of suspended breath, ruled by a queen whose body is failing, but whose will refuses to yield. In private, Elizabeth's suffering intensifies. Chronic pain erodes her sleep, her appetite diminishes, her strength fades. Walking becomes laborious. Even sitting upright can exhaust her. The treatments offered by her physicians grow more desperate, more invasive. They bleed her. They purge her. They administer remedies that promise balance but deliver harm. Elizabeth submits not because she believes in them, but because refusing would acknowledge helplessness. The Queen's mental state darkens. Moments of clarity are followed by withdrawal. She becomes increasingly silent, then suddenly sharp. Her moods swing, leaving courtiers uneasy. Some whisper that she is losing her mind. In truth, she is losing her body, and the two are inseparable. Elizabeth's faith deepens during this time. She reflects more openly on divine judgment, on destiny, on the burden of rule. But even faith cannot comfort her fully. She fears not death but exposure. She fears that the truth of her suffering will reduce her legacy to weakness. So she hides. As the years grind on, Elizabeth's presence becomes more symbolic than active. She still signs documents, still gives approval, still reigns. But the machinery of government moves increasingly around her, careful not to disturb the fragile center. This arrangement is dangerous. If she were to collapse suddenly, chaos would follow. Yet no contingency is openly discussed, because to discuss it would be to betray the illusion. Elizabeth is aware of this risk. She accepts it anyway. Control, even illusory control, matters more to her than safety. In her final years, Elizabeth becomes a paradox, a queen more powerful in symbol than ever before, and more fragile in reality than anyone is allowed to acknowledge. Her illness has consumed her privacy, her comfort, her joy, but it has not broken her will, not yet. By now, Elizabeth's illness has reshaped not only her days, but her nights. Sleep no longer comes naturally. When it does, it is shallow and easily broken. Pain wakes her, thoughts wake her. The weight of unfinished rule presses against every moment of rest. She begins to sleep sitting upright. This is not ceremonial, it is necessity. Lying down worsens her discomfort, tightens her chest, intensifies the pressure in her head. Chairs replace beds, cushions replace comfort. The Queen of England rests like someone waiting rather than living. Those closest to her notice this change with alarm. A monarch who refuses to lie down is a monarch refusing to surrender even briefly. Rest feels too much like practice for death. Elizabeth's appetite fades further. Food becomes functional, not pleasurable. Meals are skipped, portions shrink. The physical weakness that follows only deepens her fatigue, creating a cycle she cannot escape. Her physicians grow increasingly concerned, though they never say it directly. Instead, they increase intervention. More remedies, stronger purges, more bloodletting. Each treatment weakens her further, but to stop would mean admitting failure, both theirs and hers. Elizabeth submits with clenched resolve. Pain is familiar. Control is what matters. Her appearance now requires significant assistance. Dressing takes hours. Movement is slow. Every step must be planned. But once prepared, once armored in image and ritual, she still commands the room. The performance is exhausting. After public appearances, she collapses not visibly, but internally. Silence follows. Darkness. Long stretches where no one sees her. Rumors spread. Foreign courts speculate openly now. England's allies worry. Its enemies watch carefully. The illusion is thinning. Elizabeth responds by clinging even harder to authority. She becomes resistant to advice, stubborn where once she was strategic. She reopens old debates. She hesitates on new decisions. Her illness makes adaptation difficult. Time, once her ally, is now her enemy. Her emotional state grows heavier. The loneliness of her position, long endured, becomes unbearable. Those she once trusted are gone. New faces do not carry the same weight. She feels surrounded yet profoundly alone. This isolation deepens her sadness. Elizabeth has always been disciplined, but now discipline becomes rigidity. She resists change reflexively. Anything new feels threatening. The world beyond her control seems to be accelerating. Her refusal to name an heir becomes almost obsessive. She avoids the topic entirely. When pressed, she deflects with anger or silence. To speak of succession would be to invite replacement into the room. She cannot bear that. Elizabeth's illness has made the idea of being supplanted feel like erasure. After decades of sacrifice, she refuses to vanish quietly. Her body, however, is no longer cooperating. Walking grows painful. Standing for long periods is impossible. Her hands shake more noticeably. Her speech occasionally falters, not from loss of intellect, but from exhaustion. Courtiers adapt discreetly. They bring chairs unasked. They shorten proceedings. They speak softer. The Queen notices all of it. It infuriates her. She hates being accommodated. Help feels like admission of decline. Decline feels like defeat. So she pushes back. She stays upright longer than she should. She listens longer than she can. She refuses to leave rooms when her body begs her to. The cost is severe. Each act of defiance leaves her weaker. Recovery takes longer. Pain lingers. Elizabeth is now ruling through sheer will. This defiance becomes symbolic. She will not lie down. She will not name an heir. She will not release control. Her illness, once hidden, now shapes every interaction. And yet, publicly, England still sees a queen. Her speeches, though fewer, carry gravity. Her presence still commands loyalty. Her myth remains intact. But behind closed doors, those closest to her understand the truth. Elizabeth is dying, slowly, stubbornly, on her own terms. The tragedy is not simply that she is suffering. It is that she is suffering alone. No confession, no public reckoning, no shared grief, only endurance. As her strength continues to fade, something shifts. Elizabeth begins to withdraw, not just physically, but emotionally. She speaks less, reacts less. The fire that once burned so fiercely dims into a quiet, relentless resolve. She is not afraid, she is tired, but even in exhaustion, she refuses to let go. Not yet. As Elizabeth's strength drains away, time itself seems to slow around her. Days blur together, marked less by events and more by endurance. The rhythm of court life continues, but it no longer revolves around ambition or celebration. It revolves around the Queen's capacity to remain present. Her illness now governs everything. She rarely leaves her private chambers. When she does, it is brief, deliberate, carefully staged. Each appearance costs her more than the last. The effort required to remain upright, alert, and authoritative grows immense. And still, she refuses to lie down. Chairs surround her, cushions support her, but beds remain untouched. Lying flat feels like surrender, like an admission that the end is no longer theoretical. Elizabeth will not give death that victory. Those closest to her notice how thin she has become. Her face, once rounded by youth and power, sharpens beneath layers of makeup. The strain shows through. Her eyes, though still sharp, are ringed with exhaustion. She speaks less now, not because she has nothing to say, but because speech itself demands strength. When she does speak, her words are precise, weighted, often final. She has no energy for waste. Her temper softens. This surprises the court. The volatility that once accompanied her illness fades into something quieter. Anger requires energy. Elizabeth no longer has it to spare. What replaces it is a distant, narrowing of focus. She is conserving herself. The Queen's isolation deepens further. Visitors are limited. Conversations shortened. She prefers silence now. Silence does not demand explanation. At night, she remains upright in her chair, drifting in and out of shallow sleep. Servants watch anxiously, afraid to disturb her. The room is dim, heavy with waiting. Elizabeth's physicians grow increasingly helpless. They offer remedies out of habit, more than hope. The treatments no longer promise recovery, only delay. Elizabeth knows this. She accepts their ministrations without comment. Pain has become background noise, a constant companion. She has outlived fear of it. Her thoughts turn inward. She reflects on her reign not in grand terms, but in fragments. Faces remembered, decisions replayed, losses acknowledged quietly. There is no public confession, no dramatic reckoning. Elizabeth has never been one to explain herself. Her faith remains steady but subdued. She prays not for survival, but for endurance, for clarity, for control over the final moments she can still command. The succession remains unresolved. Advisors grow desperate. England teeters on uncertainty. Everyone knows the Queen's time is nearly gone, yet no one dares force the issue. Elizabeth's silence holds the nation hostage. She understands this, and still, she will not speak. Naming an heir would mean transferring authority while she still breathes. It would mean becoming irrelevant before death has claimed her. She will not allow that. As her body weakens further, Elizabeth stops engaging in many of the rituals that once defined her. Music fades, courtly entertainments cease. The grandeur dissolves into stillness. Only the image remains. Even now, she insists on being dressed properly, on maintaining dignity, on being seen when she is seen as queen. The illusion matters until the very end. In these final days, Elizabeth's mind remains remarkably intact. There is no dramatic collapse of reason, no madness, only exhaustion. This clarity makes her decline all the more painful to witness. She knows what is happening. She chooses not to comment on it. Her breathing grows labored, her movements slow further. She requires assistance to shift in her chair, yet she still resists lying down. Servants and advisors exchange worried glances. They understand what she is refusing. To lie down is to accept that the body has won. Elizabeth is not ready. The atmosphere around her becomes heavy, reverent, almost unreal. People whisper. Footsteps soften. Everyone waits for permission to acknowledge what is obvious. It never comes. Elizabeth's silence is her final act of control. Eventually, even sitting becomes too much. Her head droops. Her eyes close for longer stretches. Her grip on the armrests loosens. The will that has driven her for decades begins to falter, not from fear, but from fatigue. The end approaches not with drama, but with quiet inevitability. Elizabeth has fought her illness for years with denial, discipline, and image. She has outlasted expectations. She has ruled through pain longer than anyone imagined. Now, there is nothing left to prove. Still, she does not speak, not of illness, not of regret, not of succession. She has carried England on her back while her body failed beneath her, and she will carry that burden to the very edge. The year is 1603. In the grand halls of Richmond Palace, a silence hangs heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the vibrant, boisterous court that has defined an entire era. At its center is a figure who has become more than a monarch. She is an icon, a symbol of England itself. But now, Queen Elizabeth I, Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, is fading. For over 44 years, she has steered her kingdom through treacherous waters, defying the Spanish Armada, navigating religious turmoil, and overseeing a golden age of culture. She has outlived her rivals, her advisors, and even her own myth of eternal youth. At 69 years old, the toll of a lifetime of rule is finally showing. Her decline began subtly. For months, the Queen had been plagued by a deep, unshakable melancholy. The recent execution of her once favorite courtier, Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, for treason had cast a long shadow over her spirit. Those closest to her noticed a change. Her legendary wit grew dim, her sharp tongue softened, and she often sat in silence for hours. Lost in thought, her finger pressed against her lips, a habit that had become more pronounced in her later years. The physicians of the court, a nervous collection of men armed with theories and tinctures, were baffled. They diagnosed her with a settled and unremovable melancholy. They offered her remedies, broths, and tonics, but Elizabeth, ever defiant, refused most of them. She had always distrusted doctors, and in her final days, that distrust hardened into outright refusal. She would not be prodded or poked. She would not surrender her body to their experiments. In early March, her condition worsened. A persistent fever took hold, and she grew weaker by the day. Her ladies-in-waiting, women who had served her for decades, tried to coax her into bed, but Elizabeth refused. For days on end, she stood, leaning against the tapestries and cushions piled on the floor by her servants. Why? Perhaps she saw going to bed as the final surrender, an admission that her reign, her life, was over. To lie down was to invite death, and Elizabeth had spent a lifetime defying expectations. She would not give in so easily. Her loyal Archbishop, John Whitgift, and her chief minister, Robert Cecil, pleaded with her. They begged her to rest, to take nourishment. Cecil, a man whose own father had been Elizabeth's most trusted advisor, reportedly told her, "Your Majesty, to content the people, you must go to bed." Elizabeth, summoning a flash of her old fire, allegedly shot back, little man, the word must is not to be used to princes." But even her iron will could not hold back the inevitable. After standing for nearly 4 days, her body finally gave out, and her ladies gently lowered her onto the cushions. She remained there, silent, her eyes open, gazing at something beyond the concerned faces surrounding her. She refused food, taking only sips of juice or broth to wet her dry lips. The atmosphere in the palace was thick with anxiety. The question of succession, a topic Elizabeth had famously avoided for her entire reign, was now a deafening roar. England had no declared heir. The country held its breath, fearing the chaos of a power vacuum, the potential for civil war. Robert Cecil, ever the pragmatist, had already been in secret correspondence with King James VI of Scotland, the son of Elizabeth's executed cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. It was the only logical choice, but it needed the Queen's final official blessing. As she lay on the floor, her counsellors gathered around her. They needed an answer. They named a potential claimant, Lord Beauchamp, but Elizabeth, though weak, reacted with fury, her voice a mere rasp. "I will have no rascal son in my seat." Then, they cautiously named the King of Scots. This time, there was no anger. According to some accounts, when they asked for a sign if she accepted James as her heir, she made a small gesture, a circle in the air with her hand, a motion thought to signify a crown or perhaps just a faint sign of assent. With that, the future of the kingdom was secured. Her final hours were a vigil. Archbishop Whitgift knelt by her side, praying for her soul. She held his hand, indicating he should continue his prayers long after his old knees must have been aching. He prayed until she slipped into a deep sleep, from which she would not wake. On the evening of March 23rd, the end drew near. Her breathing grew shallow. The ladies-in-waiting, who had meticulously chronicled every detail of her life, from her dresses to her moods, now watched the final chapter unfold. Just after midnight, in the early dark hours of March 24th, 1603, Queen Elizabeth I, the last Tudor monarch, died. The legend says, a strange quiet fell over the palace, as if the very stones were in mourning. The famous coronation ring she had worn for 45 years, a symbol of her marriage to England, had grown so tight over the decades that it had to be sawn from her finger. It was a painful, final symbol of the end of an era. News of her death spread through London like wildfire. Contrary to fears of chaos, the people of England reacted with a profound and collective grief. They had known no other monarch. She was their constant, their protector, their Gloriana. Shops closed, and the streets were filled with mourners. The woman who had been both feared and loved, who had ruled with a blend of shrewd intelligence and theatrical flair, was gone. A few days later, a courier, Sir Robert Carey, rode north. He rode relentlessly, day and night, to carry the news to Edinburgh. He arrived, exhausted and mud-spattered, and presented King James VI of Scotland with the sapphire ring taken from Elizabeth's finger. James VI of Scotland was now James I of England, and the Stuart dynasty had begun. Elizabeth's funeral was an unprecedented spectacle of mourning. A life-sized effigy of the Queen, dressed in her Parliament robes with a crown on its head and a sceptre in its hand, was carried through the streets of London on a grand hearse. It was so lifelike that onlookers gasped and wept as it passed. She was laid to rest in Westminster Abbey, in the same tomb as her half-sister, Mary I. The Latin inscription on their shared tomb reads, "Partners both in throne and grave, here rest, we two sisters, Elizabeth and Mary, in the hope of one resurrection." The death of Elizabeth I was more than the passing of a queen. It was the end of the Tudor age, and the end of a unique 44-year-long chapter in history, defined by one woman's incredible strength and complexity. She left behind a legacy of a secure, prosperous, and culturally rich nation, and a myth that continues to fascinate us to this day. Her final days were not a portrait of a glorious warrior queen, but of a vulnerable, stubborn, and profoundly human woman grappling with the end of her extraordinary life. Thank you so much for watching. After Elizabeth's death, the machinery of monarchy moves with startling speed. The body is barely cold before the future is secured. Proclamations are issued. Bells ring. James is declared king. England exhales, not in relief, but in recognition that the long pause has ended. There is no public reckoning with how Elizabeth died. Her illness is quietly absorbed into vague language. Age, weakness, God's will, the decades of pain, the sleepless nights, the refusal to lie down, the slow erosion of her body, all of it disappears behind ceremony. This is intentional. The Tudor court understands the power of narrative. To preserve stability, Elizabeth must be remembered as strong until the end. To admit that she ruled while gravely ill would raise uncomfortable questions about governance, succession, and vulnerability, so the truth is softened. Her physicians leave few records. What exists is clinical, cautious, incomplete. Symptoms are listed without interpretation. Causes are avoided. Responsibility is blurred. The silence becomes official. Elizabeth's body is prepared for burial with the same care that shaped her public image in life. Makeup is applied, hair arranged, the face is smoothed into serenity. Even in death, the illusion is maintained. Her funeral is grand. The imagery emphasizes continuity, majesty, triumph. She is praised as Gloriana, as the Virgin Queen, as the architect of England's strength. There is no mention of suffering. There never is. This erasure is not accidental. It serves a purpose. To acknowledge Elizabeth's illness would humanize her too much. It would suggest that power has limits, that endurance is costly, that even the greatest ruler cannot escape decay. Myth demands perfection. History obliges. As years pass, the details of her final decline fade. Portraits freeze her in ageless form. Writers romanticize her wit, her resolve, her command. The woman who slept upright in pain vanishes. What remains is symbol. The silence surrounding her illness also protects those who served her. Ministers who delayed action, doctors who harmed more than healed, courtiers who watched decline without intervention, or absolved by omission. No one is blamed. No one is questioned. This makes Elizabeth's suffering a private matter retroactively, even though it shaped the fate of a nation. Later generations speculate. Some suggest poisoning, others propose cancers, infections, depression. Modern historians reconstruct symptoms from scattered clues, but certainty is impossible. Elizabeth ensured that. Her refusal to speak openly about her body means that the truth dies with her. What remains is inference. But even speculation misses the point. The terrifying truth is not what disease killed Elizabeth. It is how completely she was forced or chose to hide it. Her reign teaches us something uncomfortable about power. Strength is often measured by silence. Endurance is praised only when it remains invisible. Pain is acceptable only when it does not disrupt the image. Elizabeth understood this better than anyone. She paid for it with her body. In erasing her illness from history, we preserve her myth but lose her humanity. We forget that leadership can coexist with suffering, that authority can mask fragility, that greatness can demand self-destruction. The Virgin Queen becomes untouchable, but the woman beneath remains unheard. Her story lingers in absences, in what was not said, in the decisions delayed, in the silence maintained to the end. Elizabeth's hidden illness is terrifying not because it was rare but because it was ordinary, a body failing, a mind enduring, a system built to deny both. And perhaps that is why history prefers the myth, because acknowledging the truth would force us to confront how often power demands sacrifice without witness, how often leaders suffer alone, how easily endurance is mistaken for invincibility. Elizabeth ruled until her body could no longer comply. Then she vanished, her pain buried with her. What we remember is glory. What we forget is cost. And in that forgetting, the most human part of her story disappears. Long after Elizabeth's death, the silence surrounding her illness hardens into tradition. It becomes part of how power is understood, taught, and remembered. Monarchs are not bodies. Rulers do not weaken. Leadership is presented as an unbroken line of command, untouched by pain. Elizabeth's reign becomes a template. Future rulers study her image, not her endurance. They learn how to perform strength, how to weaponize ceremony, how to hide decline. The lesson absorbed is simple and dangerous. Vulnerability is failure. This idea does not remain confined to monarchy. It seeps into governance itself. Leaders across centuries are praised for stoicism, for working through illness, for refusing rest. Suffering becomes proof of dedication. Silence becomes virtue. Elizabeth's hidden illness thus echoes far beyond Tudor England. Her story helps normalize the expectation that power must come at the expense of the body, that to rule is to endure privately, that personal suffering is irrelevant if the state survives. This myth is powerful. It convinces societies to accept opacity, to tolerate secrecy, to overlook warning signs in the name of stability. Elizabeth's refusal to name an heir while ill becomes romanticized as resolve, rather than recognized as risk. Her physical collapse is framed as devotion, not cost. History rewards the outcome, not the process. England survives. The transition is peaceful. Therefore, the method is justified. But this logic erases alternatives. It ignores the instability prolonged by silence, the anxiety imposed on a nation, the suffering concentrated in a single human body. Elizabeth's illness, concealed so completely, becomes invisible precedent. When later rulers fall ill, their secrecy is defended as tradition. Privacy is conflated with strength. Transparency is viewed as weakness. The cost of this inheritance is subtle but enduring. Societies become accustomed to leaders who hide, to decisions made behind closed doors, to the absence of accountability during moments of physical or mental decline. Elizabeth did not create this dynamic, but her reign perfected it. Her legacy becomes a cautionary tale disguised as triumph. Modern historians, looking back, begin to question this narrative. They examine letters, ambassador reports, medical notes. They piece together a woman suffering through years of untreated or mistreated illness. What emerges is not a diminished Elizabeth but a more complex one, a ruler whose strength lay not in invulnerability, but in relentless endurance. And yet, even modern retellings often hesitate to fully acknowledge Elizabeth's suffering, risks undermining the myth that has defined her place in history. It challenges comfortable stories about leadership, sacrifice, and greatness. It forces a question we rarely ask. What is the acceptable cost of power? Elizabeth's story suggests the cost was total. Her body, her comfort, her privacy, her humanity, all traded for stability. This exchange becomes normalized. We praise leaders who ignore illness. We admire those who work through pain. We expect endurance without transparency. Elizabeth's hidden illness thus continues to shape expectations centuries later. The silence still matters, because it teaches us what to ignore. It teaches us to look away from suffering when it wears a crown or a title, or authority of any kind. Elizabeth's greatness is real, her achievements undeniable, but so is her pain. To remember only one is to misunderstand both. Her reign was not simply a golden age. It was a long negotiation between will and flesh, between image and reality lost. Elizabeth's body broke first. The terrifying truth is not that she was ill. It is that the system she ruled required her to pretend she was not, that her suffering had to be hidden to preserve power, that silence was rewarded more than honesty. In this way, Elizabeth's story becomes uncomfortably familiar. It mirrors modern leadership, modern expectations, modern denial. We still demand strength without rest. We still punish vulnerability. We still equate silence with competence. Elizabeth did not just rule England, she helped define how power conceals pain. And until that lesson is questioned, her legacy remains unfinished. In the end, Elizabeth I did not lose her crown, her throne, or her kingdom. England remained intact. The succession passed without civil war. History declared her reign a triumph. What Elizabeth lost was far quieter. She lost the right to be visibly human. The terrifying truth hidden beneath her reign is not a single illness waiting to be named by modern medicine. It is not merely poisoned makeup, rotting teeth, or chronic pain, though all of these likely played their part. The real horror lies deeper, woven into how power demanded silence from her body. Elizabeth learned early that a queen could not be seen to weaken. A woman might be ill. A monarch could not be. So she trained herself to endure, to disguise, to perform strength even when her body resisted every movement. Pain became routine. Exhaustion became discipline. Denial became policy. Her illness was not ignored, it was managed into invisibility. She ruled through headaches that split her concentration, through nights without sleep, through treatments that drained more blood than they restored strength. She governed while sitting upright because lying down felt too much like rehearsal for death, and she never allowed the world to see it, because the moment her suffering became visible, her authority would be questioned. Enemies would circle, allies would hesitate, the future of England would wobble. So Elizabeth chose silence. That choice preserved her power, but it consumed her body. This is the truth history prefers not to dwell on. We celebrate the Golden Age. We quote her speeches. We admire her intelligence, her political instinct, her refusal to bow to pressure. But we rarely ask what that refusal cost. Elizabeth's body paid the price of stability. She turned herself into an image so rigid that there was no room left inside it for rest. The Virgin Queen myth did not merely protect her, rule it, trapped her inside it. If she belonged to no one, then no one could claim her weakness. If she was eternal and symbol, then her mortality could be ignored, until it could not. Her final years were not marked by dramatic collapse, but by relentless diminishment. Less movement, fewer words, more silence. The will remained sharp, long after the flesh could no longer keep pace. She did not dramatize her suffering. She did not confess it. She did not ask for sympathy. She endured it. And when she finally died, the truth died with her. History smoothed her face in death, as it had in life. Her illness was reduced to age. Her pain folded into dignity. The years of quiet suffering were erased, so the myth could remain clean. That erasure became part of her legacy, because remembering her pain would complicate the story. It would force us to admit that greatness can be built on self-destruction, that stability can depend on silence, that power often survives by consuming the person who holds it. Elizabeth's reign teaches us something unsettling. Not that illness weakens leadership, but that leadership often requires pretending illness does not exist. Her body was treated as collateral, her suffering as irrelevant, her endurance as virtue. And we still inherit that lesson. We still praise leaders who never rest. We still admire silence over vulnerability. We still confuse endurance with strength. Elizabeth did not just rule England. She helped define a model of power where pain must be hidden, where collapse is postponed until the very end, and where the human cost is excluded from the final judgment. The terrifying truth is not that Elizabeth I was slowly dying. It is that everyone depended on her to do so quietly, and history rewarded her for it. That is what lies beneath the legend. That is what was sealed into silence. That is the truth that survives only if we are willing to look past the crown.